Chapter 1. The Punishment. The Tribunal chamber hung in orbit above the jewel-blue planet of Curies, its crystalline walls glowing faintly with the planet's reflected light. Rows of alien nobles, draped in silver-threaded cloaks and crowned with jeweled antennae, murmured in hushed tones as the accused was led forward. Princess Lorana of the High House kept her chin high, though her wrists burned where the binding cuffs cut into her skin. She could feel their eyes piercing her like blades, former allies now relishing her fall from grace. A resonant chime echoed through the chamber. By decree of the Royal Council, intoned the arbiter, his voice layered with metallic harmonics. You, Lorana of House Vera, are hereby stripped of station, dignity, and claim to inheritance. Your arrogance and waste have dishonored our people. Your punishment is fitting. His eyes flicked toward the side chamber, where a figure stood in shadow. The murmur grew louder, laced with disdain and curiosity. A human, he stepped forward into the glow of the tribunal's crystalline floor. His boots clanged against the metal with an unpolished weight, not the whisper-soft glide of noble footwear. His clothing was worn spacer's gear, leather straps patched with synfabric, a jacket scuffed from years of work rather than ornament. His face was tanned and roughened by travel, eyes a storm gray that refused to bow beneath alien gazes. This is Ethan Vance, the arbiter declared, a human spacer. You will be offered to him. You will serve him, live beneath his command. A slave to a species you once called primitive. Let this humiliation be your correction. The chamber erupted in laughter, sharp and cruel. Lorana's throat tightened, but she forced herself not to flinch. To be given to a human? A man whose kind her people considered brutes of the frontier, useful for labor but unworthy of nobility's notice? She would rather have been executed. The arbiter gestured, and the guards shoved her forward. Her body stumbled, silks tearing against the crystalline floor. For the first time, she looked directly at the human meant to be her master. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply extended a hand to steady her. The gesture made the chamber fall silent, as though the nobles couldn't quite comprehend it. Lorana stared at his rough, callous palm. An insult? Surely. Some stage cruelty. Yet his eyes were steady, not mocking but steady. Human eyes that burned with something alien to her court. Quiet dignity. She slapped his hand away and rose on her own. "Do not touch me," she hissed, voice trembling more from fear than venom. His jaw tightened, but he inclined his head slightly, almost respectful. "As you wish, princess." His voice was low, stripped of the layered harmonics that marked her people's speech. It was raw, unadorned, and disturbingly real. The nobles whispered. Their amusement soured into confusion. The arbiter, unsettled, waved the matter closed. So it is decreed. She is his, until her shame is purged or her life expires. Take them away. The crystalline walls pulsed, and the chamber doors parted with a sigh of hydraulics. Lorana felt the chains tug her forward, but this time the human moved beside her, not behind her. Not like a master, but like an escort. The corridor beyond the tribunal smelled of ozone and starship coolant, a jarring change from the perfumed halls of her palace. The distant hum of docked freighters reverberated through the floor. She kept her head turned away, but she couldn't help glancing at him from the corner of her eye. "You're supposed to drag me in chains," she said bitterly, testing him. He glanced at her, brow furrowed. "That's not how I do things." She barked a laugh, harsh and hollow. "And what are things? Human? Do you intend to play the benevolent master? Feed me crumbs while I scrub your ship." His silence stretched long enough that she almost thought he wouldn't answer. Then, with a shrug, he said, "You're not my punishment, princess. You're their mistake. I'll treat you how I want to be treated." His words struck her like a blow. She quickened her pace to hide her unease, but she couldn't escape the strange dissonance gnawing in her chest. No one in her life, not guards, not suitors, not even her family, had ever spoken to her without calculation. Yet this human, who had every right to revel in her disgrace, spoke as though she were simply a person. The docking bay doors opened, flooding the corridor with the smell of engine grease and the glare of plasma lights. His ship loomed there, battered and scarred from 100 journeys, nothing like the polished star cruisers of her house. But its engines pulsed with a steady thrum, alive in a way her palace had never been. For the first time since her punishment was declared, Lorana felt something other than fury. She felt uncertainty. And for the first time in her life, she wondered if the galaxy her people had mocked, the galaxy of humans, held truths her crown had never let her see. Chapter 2, Chains and Kindness. The freighter's airlock groaned as the heavy had sealed behind them, cutting off the glittering tribunal halls and leaving only the dim hum of machinery. Princess Lorana had expected cold confinement, shackles, or a cage to remind her of her shame. Instead, the corridor smelled faintly of engine oil and brewed stem coffee, its bulkhead scarred with burn marks from battles fought long before exile. "This is it," she muttered, her voice dripping disdain. A rusted shell to match its rusted master. Ethan Vance didn't flinch. He moved past her with a slow, even gait, the weight of his boots reverberating through the deck. "She may not be pretty, but she's home," he said simply, brushing his hand over the corridor wall. "And unlike your palace, she's earned her scars." Lorana bristled at the quiet rebuke, though she didn't fully understand why it stung. She had been prepared for mockery, for commands barked at her like she was a beast of burden. Instead, his words carried a strange pride, not in power or bloodline, but in endurance. He led her into the central cabin, a narrow chamber cluttered with toolboxes, folded blankets, and a table scarred by countless meals. The ceiling hummed with the faint pulse of artificial gravity. A viewport framed the black canvas of space beyond, where distant stars burned cold and sharp. It was no palace, but it felt oddly alive. "Sit," Ethan said, nodding toward the bench by the table. She lifted her chin. "You presume too much. I am not some. I didn't mean it as an order." He dropped a ration pack onto the table and tore it open, the plastifoil crinkling under his callous hands. "Just thought you might be hungry." The scent hit her first, savory broth, warm and spiced, utterly foreign to the delicate crystal nectars of her people. Her stomach betrayed her with a low, aching growl. She hadn't eaten since before the tribunal. Her face burned as Ethan slid the steaming bowl toward her. No mocking smile, no demand for obedience, just an offering. She narrowed her eyes. "This is pity. You think to soften me with scraps." He leaned back in his chair, spoon clinking softly against his own bowl. "Call it what you want. Food's food. If you'd rather starve, that's your choice." For a long moment, pride warred with hunger. Finally, she snatched the bowl and tasted. The broth was simple, earthy, far too salty for a refined palate. Yet as it slid down her throat, warmth bloomed in her chest, melting the chill that had wrapped around her since her sentencing. "You don't even gloat," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "Why would I?" "Because I was offered to you," she snapped, her voice cracking. "A human spacer, given a fallen princess's property. My people meant for me to crawl, to beg, to be broken. That's what they wanted you to do to me." His spoon paused midair. He met her gaze with that same storm-gray steadiness. "I'm not in the business of breaking people. Chains don't fix anything." The words lodged in her throat. Chains don't fix anything. She'd lived her entire life surrounded by invisible ones. Expectations, rules, the weight of a crown she had never chosen. Ethan pushed back on the table and stood, moving to a locker by the wall. With a metallic hiss, The cuffs binding her wrists disengaged and clattered onto the deck. Her arms felt suddenly weightless, bare. She rubbed her wrists, staring at the red marks like they were foreign. "Why?" she asked, her voice a whisper. "Because I don't need chains to keep you here," he said, returning to his seat. "You'll leave when you want to. Until then, you're free to walk this ship as you please. Just don't touch the engines." Her laugh was sharp, incredulous. "Free? You think freedom exists here? On this junk heap drifting through the void?" Ethan smiled faintly, a weary curl of his lips. "More freedom than a palace ever gave you, I'd wager." She froze. Her spoon hovered above the broth, forgotten. His words struck deeper than she wanted to admit, echoing to the hollow place inside her that had grown since childhood. She looked away, out the viewport. Stars drifted in endless silence, their cold light glinting against her eyes. For the first time since her disgrace, Lorana felt the smallest, most dangerous crack in her armor of pride, and it was a human who had put it there. Chapter 3, Worlds Apart. The freighter's docking clamps shuddered into place, reverberating through the hull with metallic groan. Lorana pressed her palm against the viewport, watching the alien station bloom before her like a living organism. The Basilisk Exchange, Ethan had called it, a sprawling hub where dozens of species converge to trade, scheme, and survive. Its architecture was unlike anything she'd known. Towering spires of glass and metal twisted in impossible curves, lit by streams of neon plasma that pulsed like veins. Market domes floated in low orbit around the station's core, tethered by shimmering energy bridges. Strange ships, organic, crystalline, rusted, slipped in and out of docking bays, their hulls painted with languages she couldn't decipher. "This is chaos," she whispered. Ethan stood beside her, fastening the worn straps of his jacket. "No," he corrected gently. "This is life. The galaxy doesn't care about crowns or titles. Out here, you eat what you earn, and respect isn't given, it's built." She bristled at the tone, but her eyes betrayed her, drinking in every color, every flickering sign in alien script. Her people had told her humans thrived only on the edges of civilization, scavengers in the ruins of greater empires. Yet this place, messy, vibrant, alive, seemed to pulse with human fingerprints everywhere. The airlock hissed open. A wave of sound and scent rushed in. Sizzling food from plasma grills, the acrobat of engine exhaust, the sweet musk of alien perfumes. Lorana recoiled, pulling her silks closer. "Stay close," Ethan said, stepping into the crowd. The station's main concourse was a river of bodies. She saw scaled merchants haggling with clicking beaks, furred nomads carrying glowing cages of insects, and cybernetic miners whose eyes glowed red with artificial light. Everywhere, neon signs blazed above stalls, half of them advertising, in a crude common tongue. Parts, food, passage, debt settled quiet. And among them, humans, not in chains, not degraded. A woman with dark braids laughed as she flipped skewers of spice meat for a line of hungry aliens. A man with prosthetic arms bartered confidently with a crystalline trader. Even children darted to the crowd, weaving between claws and tails, utterly fearless. Lorana slowed, her throat tight. These weren't the brutish drifters she had been taught to scorn. They were surviving, thriving. "You see it, don't you?" Ethan's voice pulled her back. He had stopped ahead of her, leaning casually against a railing, as if the crowd was an extension of his own body. "Humans don't conquer places like this. We adapt to them. That's our strength." Her eyes narrowed. "Strength? This is desperation. Scraping by, scavenging scraps." He smirked, though it wasn't unkind. "Call what you want. But every species here knows humans don't quit. We don't shatter under pressure. We bend. And bending's what keeps you alive." She hated that part of her believed him. A group of scaled warriors shoved past, their armor gleaming, laughter cruel. Lyrana stiffened, used the deference her house's crest would command. But here, she was invisible, forgotten. For the first time in her life, she wasn't feared or revered, and it terrified her. Ethan noticed. Without a word, he shifted, placing himself between her and the warriors. His hand brushed his holster, not in threat, but in quiet assurance. It was such a simple, instinctive act that Lyrana's breath caught. "Why?" she blurted before she could stop herself. He tilted his head. "Why what? Why shield me? I am nothing to you. Worse than nothing. A burden your kind were never meant to carry." Ethan studied her for a long moment, the neon glow painting his weathered face in shifting shades of blue and red. "Because nobody deserves to feel like nothing," he said softly. Her heart stumbled. She looked away quickly, pretending to be fascinated by a stall of glowing fungi, but the words clung to her like a brand. As they moved deeper into the exchange, she began to notice other details. A miner bowing slightly when Ethan passed. A merchant nodding in respect. Subtle, unspoken acknowledgments. Deference not born of fear, but of something else. Trust. Her people had always ruled through power. Yet here, among 1,000 species, respect for humans seemed earned, not forced. And it unsettled her more than the tribunal ever had. By the time they returned to the freighter, the scent of spiced food still clinging to her silks, Lyrana was quiet. The hum of the engines greeted them like a heartbeat. She sank onto the bench, staring at her hands. Humans, she thought bitterly. They shun crowns, reject chains, yet command loyalty in ways her people never could. And for the first time, she wondered if being cast down into their world wasn't punishment at all. Chapter 4, Fire and Betrayal. The basilisk exchange was never silent, but that night the station felt restless. The neon haze seemed dimmer, the laughter sharper, the smells of roasted spice and engine fumes tinged with something acrid, like smoke before fire. Ethan noticed first. He slowed as they crossed a suspended walkway, eyes scanning the flow of bodies below. "Stay close," he murmured. Lyrana frowned, drawing her silks tighter against her frame. "You've said that every time we've stepped into this chaos. What's different now?" "Patterns," he muttered. His hand brushed the sidearm. "Crowd's wrong. Too many eyes, not enough movement." Before she could answer, the attack came. Figures in dark armor detached from the crowd, moving with coordinated precision. Helmets gleamed with insectoid mandibles carved into their faceplates. Her cousin's mercenaries. Lyrana's blood ran cold. She recognized the insignia etched on their pauldrons. The House Vera crest, her family sigil twisted now into a mark of execution. One raised a shock rifle. By decree of a high house, the mercenary's voice rasped through a translator. "The exile is terminated. Step aside, human." Ethan didn't move. His stance widened, shoulders squared. "Not gonna happen." The mercenary sneered behind the mask. "She was given to you as punishment, not protection. Do not mistake her worth." Ethan's hand tightened on his weapon. "Her worth isn't yours to measure." The air cracked as the first shot hissed past. Energy bolts seared into the walkway, sending shards of alloy sparking into the void below. Panic erupted in the marketplace. Stallkeepers ducking, aliens scattering, neon signs flickering as power conduits were hit. Ethan grabbed Lyrana's wrist and shoved her behind a cargo crate. "Stay low." She wanted to protest. She was no coward. But her voice died as another bolt scorched the railing inches from her head. Her heart pounded like a war drum. Ethan rose from cover with practiced calm, his blaster barking 3 sharp bursts. One mercenary spun, armor sparking as he crumpled. Another leapt forward, activating a grav pulse emitter. The walkway jolted violently as gravity faltered, and suddenly Lorana's stomach lurched. Her feet left the floor. Zero gravity. She clawed for purchase, silks twisting in the weightless air. Around her, food crates and glowing trinkets floated like debris in a slow storm. Shouts and gunfire warped into muffled echoes, disorienting in the weightless void. Through the chaos, she saw Ethan. He moved like he belonged there, twisting his body with controlled momentum, firing short bursts that propelled him from cover to cover. His boots magnetized with a click whenever he needed to stabilize. Every movement was efficient, deliberate. Nothing like the ceremonial duels of her people, with their rehearsed flourishes and empty honor. Two mercenaries closing on him, blades humming with crackling plasma edges. Ethan caught one by the wrist, using the man's own momentum to spin him into the other. The clash of armor sent both drifting helplessly into the voided section, their shouts fading into the noise of the crowd. Another bolt sizzled past, close enough that the heat singed Ethan's jacket. He gritted his teeth, swung off a railing, and fired point-blank into the chest plate of the last attacker. The mercenary's body convulsed, sparks bursting from the armor before drifting limp into the air. Silence returned, broken only by the hiss of vents recalibrating the walkway's gravity. The artificial pull returned suddenly, slamming debris and bodies alike back to the floor with sickening thuds. Lorana stumbled, catching herself in the crate, breath ragged. She looked around to sprawled mercenaries, her cousin's crest smeared in blood and smoke. Her stomach twisted. Ethan holstered his blaster, blood dripping from a shallow cut across his temple. He barely seemed to notice it. Instead, he scanned the crowd, jaw tight, shoulders still coiled for another attack. "You're hurt," she managed, voice hoarse. He wiped the blood away with the back of his hand. "Takes more than that. You fought them all for me?" His gaze softened just a fraction. "You think I'd let them drag you off like cargo?" He shook his head, voice steady. "No one under my protection gets treated like property. Not ever." Her throat closed. The words struck deeper than the battle itself. No one under my protection. Not once in her life had someone claimed her safety as their own duty, without asking what it would gain them. Ethan offered her a hand, not as a master, not as a rescuer demanding gratitude, but simply as a man helping another stand. This time, she didn't slap it away. She took it, and in the neon-lit ruin of the exchange, as smoke curled toward the station's artificial sky, Princess Lorana realized her cousin's betrayal had done more than disgrace her. It had given her a glimpse of humanity's most dangerous weapon. Not their guns, not their ships, their loyalty. Chapter 5. The Queen of a Rusted Throne. The freighter's engines rumbled like a giant's heartbeat, steady and imperfect, as the ship drifted away from a neon sprawl of the Basilid Exchange. Through the viewport, the station receded into a shimmer of lights, swallowed by the velvet black of space. Princess Lorana sat on the bench in the common cabin, her silks torn and stained from the fight, her pride wounded more deeply than her body. For the first time, she hadn't known which way her path would fall, until Ethan had stood between her and death without hesitation. He was at the workbench now, jacket off, sleeves rolled to the elbow, repairing one of the ship's battered control panels. His hands were rough, nicked by scars, yet his touch on the exposed wiring was careful, almost reverent. Sparks glowed against his weathered face as he muttered under his breath. Lorana found herself watching him longer than she intended. "This ship is falling apart," she said finally, her voice carrying more curiosity than scorn. Ethan grinned faintly, not looking up. "She's held together by willpower and patch plating. Bit like me. And yet you stay here," she pressed, tilting her head. "No palace, no attendants, no servants to shield you. Just rust and scars." His hand still for a moment, and he leaned back, wiping sweat from his brow with a rag. A palace hides the cracks. This ship shows them. And still she flies. The words lingered. A palace hides the cracks. She thought of the crystalline halls of her home, every flaw polished out of sight, every betrayal whispered behind jeweled masks. Compared to that, the rusted freighter felt honest. Without realizing it, she rose and stepped closer. The workbench was cluttered with tools, some sharp, some humming faintly with energy. "Show me," she said suddenly. He blinked. "Show you what?" "How it works." Her tone was sharper than she intended, as though demanding made the request less vulnerable. Ethan studied her for a moment, then slid a small device toward her. A fusion relay, its casing cracked. "Fine." Strip the damaged wire. Careful not to cross the live line. She hesitated, then picked up the cutter. Her hands trembled, and used the tools heavier than a jeweled quill. The wire sparked, making her flinch. Ethan's hand shot out, steadying hers, not controlling, but guiding. "Easy," he said softly. "Machines don't respond to fear. Just patience." She forced her breathing to slow, cutting the wire clean. He nodded, and something inside her chest loosened. A tiny, ridiculous flicker of pride. Hours passed unnoticed. She learned to splice wires, to patch a coolant tube, to tighten bolts until the engines hummed deepened into a smoother rhythm. Her silks grew stained with oil, her fingers sore, but she couldn't remember the last time her body had worked for something real. At last, Ethan stepped back, wiping his hands. "Not bad, princess. You just saved us from an overheating coil." She exhaled, smiling before she realized it. "I did that." "You did." He grinned. "Guess this junk heap has room for a queen after all." The word startled her, not spoken with mockery, but as though he meant it. She looked around the cramped cabin, its scarred table, its humming walls, the viewport showing endless stars. No court, no crown. Yet here, she felt more herself than she ever had beneath jeweled ceilings. That night, she moved through the freighter differently. She fetched water without being asked, folded blankets when she found them scattered, even attempted to cook from the ration packs, though her first attempt ended in a mess of overboiled paste that made Ethan chuckle. "You'll get it," he said, scraping the pan with practiced ease. "Took me weeks before I figured out how not to burn half my meals." Lorana should have bristled at his amusement. Instead, she laughed. A real laugh, unguarded and bright. When she settled into her bunk, the engines hummed cradling her like a lullaby. She whispered truths she dared not speak aloud. For the first time, she didn't feel like a prisoner. For the first time, she felt like she belonged. And when, the next morning, she called the freighter our home, without thinking, Ethan's small, quiet smile told her he'd heard exactly what she hadn't meant to say. Chapter 6, Heart of the Human. The freighter drifted through an asteroid belt, weaving between tumbling giants of stone and ice. From the cockpit, the viewport stretched wide, stars wheeling in slow arcs as fragments of rock caught the sun's light like shards of broken glass. The hum of the ship vibrated softly through the floor, steady and grounding, as though it alone tethered them to the void. Lorana sat in the co-pilot's chair, hands folded neatly in her lap. Her silks were long gone, replaced by one of Ethan's spare flight jackets that hung awkwardly on her shoulders. It smelled faintly of leather and engine smoke. She should have hated it. Instead, it felt like protection. "You fly this maze as if you were born to it," she said at last, her eyes tracking the asteroids drifting past. Ethan's hands moved over controls, steady, precise. Spent years running patrols in belts like this. You learn quick or you don't live long. There was no arrogance in his tone, only fact. That was what unsettled her. He wore survival like a second skin, no need for boasting. She studied his face in the dim cockpit light. The lines etched there not from age, but from burdens carried too long. Patrols, she echoed. You mean soldiering? He didn't answer at first, just adjusted the thrusters, slipped the ship between two spinning boulders with barely a whisper vibration. Finally, he exhaled, a sound heavy with memory. Yeah, he said quietly. I wore the uniform once. Earth's colonies, border conflicts, places you've never heard of and wouldn't want to. Lorana tilted her head, curiosity flickering. Why would a human, whose kind claimed to shun crowns and titles, fight wars not their own? His mouth tightened. Because someone has to. Because sometimes the only thing between a family and a burning sky is a fool willing to stand in the line of fire. Her throat constricted. There was no grand speech, no practiced rhetoric, just a man speaking of scars that never fully healed. You lost people, she whispered, sensing the truth before he spoke it. His jaw flexed. His eyes stayed fixed on the viewport, but she saw the storm within them. I did. Good people, braver than me. And when it was over, all I had left was this ship and a promise I made to myself. What promise? Ethan's hand stilled on the controls. The ship coasted between asteroids on inertia alone, engines purring low. He turned to her then, and for the first time since she had met him, she saw his defenses fall. That no one under my care would ever be abandoned. Not while I breathe. The words landed like gravity itself. She swallowed hard, fingers twisting the fabric of his jacket. You speak as though it is simple, she said, her voice trembling. Yet I was raised where loyalty was traded like coin, discarded when it became inconvenient. My cousin, my court, even my family, none hesitated to throw me to the void. Ethan leaned back, his expression softening. Then they never deserved you. Her breath caught. No suitor in the palace had ever spoken so plainly. No courtier had ever stripped away her shame with words so unvarnished. The silence stretched, filled only by the faint hiss of the oxygen recyclers. Beyond the viewport, a comet flared past, its icy tail painting the darkness with silver fire. Lorana's hand drifted toward his, hesitated, then brushed against it. Just the barest touch, tentative and trembling. Ethan didn't pull away. His hand turned, rough palm meeting her slender fingers, grounding her in a way no crown ever had. For a long moment, they simply sat there, two exiles of different worlds bound by something unspoken. Finally, Lorana whispered, Perhaps the galaxy was wrong. Perhaps humanity's strength is not in conquest, but in heart. Ethan gave a small, wry smile, though his thumb brushed her hand gently. Don't let that secret get out. Might ruin our reputation. She laughed softly, surprising herself. In the hum of the freighter, beneath the endless starlight, her fear of disgrace felt smaller than it ever had. For the first time, she did not feel discarded. She felt chosen. Chapter 7, Return of the Crown. The freighter rattled as the long-range comms activated, static rippling across the cockpit. Ethan adjusted the receiver, his brow furrowing at the incoming signal. A harsh voice filled the cabin, layered with the metallic harmonics of nobility. Attention, vessel wayfarer. You harbor the disgraced exile, Lorana of House Vera. She has been deemed a traitor and condemned to death. Surrender her at once. Lorana froze where she sat in the co-pilot's chair. The words scraped across her skin like ice. She had expected this. Her cousin's reach was long, but hearing it aloud still sent a cold weight sinking into her chest. On the viewport, a shape emerged from hyperspace. An ornate warship, its hull gleaming with etched silver sigils. Every line of its design polished for intimidation. Compared to Ethan's battered freighter, it was a predator circling a wounded animal. They've come for me, she whispered. My cousin will see me dragged in chains before the court. If you resist, they'll destroy you too. Ethan leaned back in his chair, utterly unshaken, his storm-gray eyes fixed on the warship blotting out the stars. Then they'll have to try. Her heart lurched. Ethan, you don't understand. That ship carries an entire garrison. Their weapons could cut us in half before we even raise shields. You cannot fight them. He glanced at her, and there was no arrogance in his gaze, only stubborn resolve. I don't need to fight them. I just need to stand. The calm crackled again. Human vessel, you trespass in the affairs of the High House. Surrender the exile, and you may live. Ethan pressed the transmitter. His voice carried no harmonics, no gilded flourish, just raw, steady truth. She's under my protection. You want her, you'll have to come through me. The silence that followed was heavier than weapons fire. Then came the laughter, distorted, cruel, echoing across the comm. You think a single human ship can stand against the House war fleet? You are dust beneath our banners. But the laugh faltered as other signals crackled onto the comm line. This is Dockmaster Wren of the Basilisk Exchange. The human speaks true. He defended the station against your mercenaries. He has earned respect. Another voice followed, rough and guttural. This is Captain Vatra of the Corsair Guild. The human ship patched my engines last cycle when no one else would. You'll not touch him without touching us. One by one, voices from across the station joined in. Traders, mercenaries, miners, smugglers, aliens of every shape and creed. None pledged loyalty to Ethan as a lord or master. They spoke because they had seen him, known him, and because he had treated them with the same stubborn dignity he had shown a fallen princess. Lorana's throat tightened as she listened. Her people commanded loyalty through bloodlines and crowns. Ethan commanded it through something alien to her. Earned trust. The warship's calm crackled with anger. You dare defy the High House? You would defend a traitor and the vermin who shelters her. Ethan stood, shoulders squared, voice steady as stone. Call me vermin if you like. But understand this. Humans don't give up the people we stand for. Not to kings, not to crowns, not to anyone. She's not your property. Not anymore. Lorana's eyes burned with tears she didn't want to shed. In that moment, she wasn't a disgraced exile or discarded pawn. She was someone worth standing for. On the viewport, the warship hovered, bristling with weapons, its crew no doubt furious at being defied. But the longer it lingered, the more ships on the station began to power their weapons in silent solidarity. Not fleets, not armies, just freighters and gunships, rusted and battered. But together, they formed a wall. Her cousin's ship finally withdrew, vanishing into hyperspace with a ripple of distorted starlight. The cockpit fell silent, save for the hum of the freighter's engines. Lorana turned to Ethan, words choking in her throat. You stood against them, she whispered. Against everything I was taught was unshakable. He sat again, letting out a slow breath. Crowns don't scare me. People do. Losing them, failing them, that's the real fear. Her hand trembled, but she reached for his anyway, gripping it tight. For the first time, she didn't feel like a burden. She felt like a choice. And somewhere deep inside, the chains of her old life broke a little more. Chapter 8, A Queen by Choice. The freighter's engines purred as it drifted free of the asteroid belt, the stars stretching like silver threads across the black canvas of space. But the peace did not last. A final summons lit the comm, its tone sharp and imperial. This is the High House. The Arbiter's voice boomed, layered with the metallic resonance of command. The exile has polluted herself among vermin, and dares stand beneath their banner. Lorana Vera, present yourself. You will return for judgment. Lorana stood in the center of the cabin. The glow of the viewport painting her in pale starlight. The demand carried the weight of her people's entire history, pressing on her shoulders like an invisible crown. Her silks were long gone, replaced by Ethan's patched jacket. Oil stains darkened her fingers. Her pride, once her armor, had been burned away, leaving something sharper, stronger beneath. She lifted her chin, not to the voice of the arbiter, but to the stars themselves. No. The single word cut to the cabin like a blade. Ethan froze at the controls, his gray eyes snapping toward her. Even the calm line stuttered, the arbiter falling silent. Lyrana stepped forward, her voice rising. I will not crawl back to a throne that cast me aside. You offer me to a human as punishment, thinking a humiliation. But you are blind. He has shown me more loyalty than a lifetime beneath jeweled halls. He has given me what crowns never could. Choice. The calm hissed with outrage. You dare renounce your bloodline? You shame the house. She laughed, bitter and bright. It is the house that shamed itself when it believed cruelty was power, when it thought chains could bind loyalty. Humanity has shown me otherwise. Her hand found Ethan's, fingers lacing with his, steady and sure. She looked at him, and her next words were not for the tribunal, but for him alone. They gave me to you as punishment, yet you treated me like a queen. Ethan's jaw tightened, his rough fingers brushing hers in silent answer. For once, he had no deflection, no sardonic grin, just quiet certainty in his gaze, storm-gray and unyielding. The tribunal shouted threats, their voices layered in fury. But outside the viewport, ships began to drift closer. Not warships, not fleets, but freighters, haulers, patched gunboats. Traders, mercenaries, smugglers, all those who had heard Ethan's defiance and answered not to crowns, but to conscience. One by one, their lights flared to life, surrounding the freighter in a ragged constellation. 1,000 tiny stars against the might of a single empire. The arbiter's voice faltered, the anger thin against the silence of so many witnesses. At last the channel cut, leaving only the steady hum of engines. Lyrana released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. For the first time in her life, she was not bound by blood, by duty, by fear. She was bound only by choice. She turned to Ethan, eyes glistening in the starlight. I do not know where this path leads, but I know this. I choose it. I choose us. Ethan's lips curved, not in triumph, but in quiet acceptance. He squeezed her hand, then looked out at the stars. Then we make our own crown, he said softly. The freighter's thrusters engaged, carrying them away from the tribunal's shadow. The galaxy stretched before them, uncertain, dangerous, alive. And as the hum of the ship wrapped around them, Lyrana whispered truth that felt like freedom. Not a queen by blood, a queen by choice. The freighter's engines thrummed like a heartbeat, steady and alive, as it slipped free of the tribunal's shadow. Outside the viewport, stars unfolded in endless constellations, cold and beautiful, while distant neon worlds shimmered like lanterns in the void. The galaxy felt impossibly vast, and yet inside the cabin, it was suddenly small, intimate. Lyrana stood beside Ethan, no crown upon her head, no silks upon her shoulders, only his worn jacket wrapped around her, smelling faintly of smoke and steel. Once, her people had called this humiliation. Now it felt like freedom. They thought giving me to you was a punishment, she said softly, eyes on the drifting starlight. But you gave me something greater than any throne. Ethan looked at her, steady as always, his storm-gray eyes reflecting the stars. What's that? She turned, her hand finding his, fingers lacing together like they had always been meant to. Choice, a life I can call my own, and someone worth choosing it with. For a long moment, the hum of the engines filled the silence, carrying the weight of everything they had survived. Chains broken, crowns defied, loyalty forged. Ethan squeezed her hand, a rare smile breaking across his face. Then let's make it count. You and me, our home out there, together. They watched as the freighter leapt into hyperspace, the stars stretching into brilliant rivers of light. And for the first time, she did not see punishment or exile. She saw the beginning,